be here. Hands up on who I need to introduce Jeevan to. Who is also the co-founder of Veracity AI. So Dr. Connie and Jeevan, we'd love to have you on stage to kick the event off today. Over to you.
Can you hear me? Or hello? Yeah, it works.
So I think, thank you, Dr. Connie, for coming and making the trip all the way here. I think everyone's really excited to hear really your story, right? What got you into investing, or maybe where you started? I kind of went to your Wikipedia page, and I understood that you started your own company first. You took it public, and then after that, you started investing in companies. So maybe tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and where you are now and investing in startups.
Okay, so I started 40 years ago. I'm 53 now, and I started at the flea market. And I sold the stuff my mom didn't need anymore. I thought she didn't need anymore. And and then 32 years ago, I started my first company. And I developed smart cards, RFID technology back those days. So I was one of the inventors of this. The first 5 years were really rough, like with any startup. It did not work. I tried to develop operating systems for smart cards and develop software. And I made my first million when I was 23, and I lost it when I was 24. So that was difficult. But then, then I was lucky that the problem about founding companies is you have to be in a market which is not there yet in order to be there when the market is really coming. And that makes it so difficult to start companies. But yeah, and then I took the company public. I had one idea, somebody asked me on a plastic card, could you put a chip on it? And then I said, well, sure, I can, like what an entrepreneur says, no clue, but of course you say, yeah, sure, no issue. I can do that. And we came from a few thousand sales to 340 million euro sales within 3 years. So that went quite well. I think that was a good idea. And and then it was a multi-billion euro company, and I sold it 2 days before the crash. So I'm sitting here just because I was lucky. So that's one, and that is also, which is really important for entrepreneurs. You have to be lucky, but I believe you can push the luck a little bit if you, is it okay? Because it's moving so much. I mean, let's have a look if this is perhaps a little bit better. Yeah. You have to be lucky sometimes. And and then I was young, and all of a sudden I had a lot of money. And then I thought, okay, what I'm doing now, I tried with not working, and that didn't work after 2 weeks I got bored. And then I started a new company, which is also very known. We were involved in the largest RFID company in the world called SmartTrack. We produce all the passports in the world. And so everybody of you has a product from me, so I'm very proud of that. And and then a third company, a fourth company, and a fifth company. And this is how I made my money. And then there was some kind of hubris you have when you're very successful. My idea was I should go to Berlin and fix the problem there. Go into politics, and that was, of course, a stupid idea to do so. But I met a young politician in a talk show, and then we said, hey, let's do this together. And I organized his campaigns, and all of a sudden I got much more involved into politics, even though I did not want to in the beginning, but then you are into it. And by the way, politics is the same around the world. We have this famous German saying, you don't want to see how politic in a sausage is made. Yeah. It's not so pretty in any country. Probably not in Sri Lanka, but in the rest of the world.
It's the same. It's worse.
And then I started to become an investor. That's typically what you do. When you're successful, you become an investor, a business angel. But that's a problem, because actually the serial entrepreneurs, they should produce more companies instead of just becoming an investor. But I thought it's perhaps not so time consuming, because to have the energy to found companies, it's not so, you cannot do it 2, 3, 4 times in a row, because all the people I met, when they are really successful, you work until the limit, and then it becomes very painful. And So yeah, and the truth is, if people would know how difficult it is to found a company, they would not found a company. So that's bad news, but the good news is there's no alternative to it. So in the history was like you could work for a bank or for consulting, and that was more secure. But now this is not secure either anymore. So then you can start right away your companies, and you will see now the world is changing toward entrepreneurship. This country, I mean, you're so privileged to be in this country because then, and you're all open-minded because otherwise you wouldn't be here. And the next 10, 20 years will be in the phase of entrepreneurship, startups. Forget the old companies, they will not make it. So you will be part of an interesting journey. And that's why I'm here. I want just to support the ecosystem that we do a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. That's a great story, I think. And I think a lot of founders can learn from it. And if I can just go back to what you said in terms of sometimes it's very difficult to be a startup because you have to kind of foresee things before the market comes into fruition. Being a serial entrepreneur of 3-4 companies, you've gone through that multiple times, like that sanity check, right? You don't know what you're doing is right. What would be your advice to kind of other founders out there who are going through similar pains, I guess? They don't really, they don't know if they found product market fit. They're kind of in this uncertain area. Like, how would you advise other startups?
This is, I think, an important question. So I founded a few companies myself, but actually I invested in 400 myself. So I saw the pain. So I'm the most active tech investor in Europe. And it's always the same. People are enthusiastic about it. So what the problem is that people are doing things with all their commitments and they are 100% enthusiastic about it, and they do it 100% good and right, but they don't think, are they doing the right things? So people should select their idea more carefully. Sometimes they are too quick into an idea instead of perhaps, even here I saw amazing talents. The question is, are they doing the right idea? Because some ideas are more difficult than other ideas. And so therefore I think choose your idea carefully. And I mean, I look at 10 companies a day, and this for 25 years. So I think I have seen a lot. The thing is that many ideas look in the beginning good, but they are not good. They are difficult. And it takes always 6-7 years to implement an internet company, and it takes 9-10 plus years for a tech company. So it's very, very painful. So it's not something short term. If you found a company, it's a commitment for a long time. It's a little bit like a marriage. It's a commitment for a long time. And actually, it's similar to a marriage because you cannot do it alone anymore. The time of single entrepreneurs is over. You need now teams. And if you spend with somebody so much time, choose your partner carefully. And he should be very different from you. It's always the same. You need one sales guy. You need some who delivers what the guy is saying. And then somebody who takes care of the financial side. And then if you have an amazing team, then you have a chance to be successful. The problem about this startup investment is out of 10, not everybody makes it. But that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter because if you do it once, if you learn so much, even if you fail, that you should do it again and do it again. And I have seen, there were some founders I financed and they didn't make it. And then they came again and said, he didn't make it. But then they became rock stars, billionaires. So I'm the guy with the most missed opportunities in Europe because I saw all the privilege of being so active is that you see any deal first. But I said no to the Tencent founders. I said, listen, this will not work in China. Too expensive, 60 million valuation. I said to Zalando, the largest e-commerce player in Europe, I said, guys, this will not work. Shoes online, never ever. To Uber, never. Who would take it? The taxi mafia is too big. Or Airbnb, who would give the space to somebody else? So I was wrong all the time, so don't believe me what I'm saying. I'm not the best role model, but a few investments I did compensated for everything because that is the way it is. Now I'm investing, I'm the largest venture capitalist in Latin America. And there, it's amazing. Anything you touch is a 50, 20x, 50x, and whatever. And this compensates for a lot of shitty investments. And this is what it's all about here too. Not all the ideas will be successful, but for me, there's no risk if I invest in Sri Lanka because a few will make it, and they will compensate for everything. And I have some advice, of course, also for you if you are a founder or if you're also an investor. See, the best is in front of you. I know you cannot imagine that Sri Lanka will become the flavor of the month and be the hotspot, but it will be. Trust me, I was one of the early investors in China, and I predicted it. It's coming. In India, the same. And the same will be in Sri Lanka. Talent is everywhere. There's no difference. Don't have this underdog feeling sometimes, when you talk or so. It's like, hey, you are as talented as anybody else. You have a better future because Europe is old people. And Sri Lanka and other are young people. So, perhaps not in 5 years, but in 10 years, the future looks much, much better. And I believe that with the internet and with being online, you can play an important role in this. It's not anymore about exporting hardware. It's about, exporting services and knowledge and business models. That's what it's all about. And just in this walking around here, I saw a few startups. It's amazing. So we need incubation centers like this, where you meet like-minded people, and then this will help, because it is difficult to found companies. We need investors. We need politicians who support us with the ecosystem. We need entrepreneurs who are willing to build a beautiful place like this. We need investors. So the biggest challenge I'm seeing at the moment here is that everybody is so conservative. Like when I talk to, let's say, some of the very successful families here, they are very conservative in a way that, listen, Sri Lanka is different. And that's bullshit, of course. Every country is the same nowadays. All the business models work the same. When I started the largest food delivery company in Europe, everybody told me when I went to India, this is not working in India because food is so cheap, we don't need this. In Arabia, where I was just coming up from Saudi Arabia, they told me everybody has a cook here, we don't need this. But guess what? The big companies now are food delivery companies. So there are business models which apply to any market. So the world became so similar. Stuff that works in London and Berlin works in Colombo. So easy, perhaps 2 years later. So you have one big privilege in this country. And you would see it as negative, but you are 5 years behind. But this is an advantage, because this way you don't have to do the same mistakes the Europeans have done. Because, and this is a book I wrote, published in nine countries. It's about missed future. Why Europe has missed the future in the digital space. And why? Because we were believing we can sell cars for always, forever. Or we can sell chemical, and we can sell banking products. But the world has changed. Look at the 20 biggest companies in the world. Just tech, only tech. And look at one single company of the US, Microsoft or Apple or Facebook. Every single company is worth more than all German companies combined. And what I learned, much more than the GDP of Sri Lanka. So that means how powerful this is. And most of the investors, they still live in the old world. So wherever I go, I met, I think, 10, 15 billionaires the last 4 days in Saudi Arabia. And they understood now. 15 years ago, I started to give speeches there about how the world is changing. And they didn't believe me. And now, due to one good guy in the front who says digitalization is the key, everybody talks about digitalization. And eventually, this will happen here too. So don't listen to CEOs of banks or insurance. They don't know anything. They're just employees. How do they know? They have never, they have never started. They could not run a kiosk, trust me. I have seen it when CEOs of big companies are starting companies. They are not capable of doing it. Because it's a complete different ball game to start a startup or to run a big company. I'm a great founder, but I'm a lousy CEO. I know that. So you have to know what you're good at. But those CEOs should not tell me on how to run startups. But we need them. It's not that they're bad people, it's just we need them. But what is happening, it's disrupting. The startups are disrupting. So if a banker now tells me, listen, we are big here and we focus on the stuff that makes money, I understand this, but it's just short-sighted because he wants to have another contract for another 4 years. But the truth is, 10 years from now, we don't need those branches anymore. Perhaps the name JP Morgan or some of the banks survive, but they will look totally different. They will only use this phone, and the young generation doesn't want to visit branches. They want to do online banking. They want to use their phone for pizza delivery. They want to use Uber, not a taxi. They want to buy online and not in a shop. So the world is changing, and you're part of it. So it's you should smile. Actually, it's so cool to be part of this whole journey. 10 years from now, you will look back and say, do you remember there was a strange German guy telling about this whole thing? And it's happening. And you will see the same development as any country else. When I started to invest in Mexico 6 years ago, people said, how can you? I bought for 26 million a VC firm. And then everybody said, why are you going? There are only drug dealers, and it's like very dangerous. And that's not true. It's one of the most beautiful countries, great entrepreneurs, and everything is booming. All our companies are growing 200, 300%. It's not us. It is just the market is exploding. Together with Jorge, I'm always going there. We can't believe it. Everything we touch grows 300-400%. And the same will happen. But can I be a little bit critical? Focus, look at the models which are proven a little bit. I know it's not sexy because people say an entrepreneur has to develop something himself, and some people who don't know, they will tell you have to go abroad very quickly and internationalize and create a global product. This will not happen. Go for the proven business models which are working in other parts of the world, or if you then adapt them for the local need. But don't invent an AI system on your own and say, hey, I will conquer the world. This will not happen. Because your time is so valuable. You should do something which is really working. And you should not try and experiment with a super new product. And even if you would create the best product in the world, nobody would believe you. Even me being German, we created the fastest database company in the world. And the Americans look at you and say, sure you did. They don't believe you. And if they don't believe us, they will not believe you. So therefore, there is a recipe, and I want to share it because, it's not for me anymore for money. I want that the ecosystem works, that countries are better off at the end of the day, and to wake up a little bit with unpopular things I'm saying to the families that they should take the money to support the next generation. The older people, I have very often the impression, they only want to gather money by investing in real estate. That's not good, because you don't have to be the richest on the graveyard. The important is to help the next generation, that you do something for the next generation. The next generation is that you create companies and that you support founders. So we need a lot more people like you guys to support this ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That was very exciting. I think it doesn't matter, it was too long. I just want to build on one of the things you said, right? You spoke about ecosystems, and Hatch is very much about creating ecosystems. What are kind of the ecosystem indicators that you kind of look at? Because you've been early to markets like Pakistan, Mexico, like you mentioned, et cetera. What are the kind of ecosystem indicators that you look at when you enter a market, I guess? And I guess what is Lion Ventures looking at when they look at Sri Lanka?
Well, I mean, first of all, don't think too much. We are not McKinsey. I mean, by the way, that you just know, the biggest losses I made are with McKinsey startups. They're amazing talents, but the thinking is just too much PowerPoint. At the end of the day, you have to sell something. So I'm not looking at in details that I say. It's a gut feeling. And the gut feeling is, hey, you're here, and I believe in 10 years you're there. I don't know what happens, but I want to be part of it. So therefore, I want to invest in some of those companies here and push a little bit perhaps the government and the ecosystem, the investors, to make this happen. But see, perhaps some people, if you would ask now somebody in Europe, hey, Sri Lanka or Mexico, you know, like countries, why would you go there? Focus on the real stuff. Yeah. But here, it's far less competition than if you go to Berlin or to Silicon Valley or New York. And it's a small country, but you know, but again, it's enough space for 20, I would say 10 or 20 unicorns. And if we just pick 2, we are fine. So, at the end of the day, I'm very optimistic about the KPIs because the demographics are good. You have so many young people here, and the young people will push into smartphone, into online, there is an early adoption for all new technologies. So therefore, I think it will get better and better over time, and the old folks will disappear. So the young ones are coming, and this gives big opportunities for everybody here. So even, you know, you have to pivot your business model. Not a single company in my life, they came with an idea to me, the idea they were successful. Every single company which came to me pivoted their business model over time. And, you know, but if you know there is a market, you know, there is a market for, let's say, for certain e-commerce, or there is a market for augmented reality. There is something, but you have to be flexible enough to change your business model and to adapt it to what is really needed. And I cannot tell you before what it is, but what I'm seeing is if you are in a market for a longer period of time, then you will find your niche. I mean, if you are talented, you know, I mean, it's brutal. You know, if you're not talented, then it does not work. But if you're a good team, it should work.
Okay. I found one of the things you said very interesting. You really look at the long term and backing your companies long term over a longer horizon usually than what most VCs, which is very, very unique. Can you give us an example of your most successful investment and also your most fondest investment, I guess, right?
Fondest? What do you mean?
Like most favorite. But it doesn't necessarily have to be successful, but and
yeah, lately I'm doing, due to the fact that I missed so many super unicorns, but they all approached me, I'm more open-minded now. Before, I was always like, people came to me and said, this will not work. Now I'm listening much more careful and say, listen, you know, I said this too often and I was wrong too often. How about listening a little bit more? So I just lately invested into a rocket company called Destinus. Still 5 years ago, I would have kicked them out of the office because saying, we do delivery within 90 minutes to any space on Earth. And now you would say, oh my God, what a stupid idea. But this guy already created 4 unicorns. So if somebody creates 4 unicorns, the 5th time you should listen, that he might do it again. And I was an investor in his previous company. I invested at a valuation of 20 million, now it's 1 billion. Okay. So he already paid for the entry ticket. So now I'm the chairman of this company, and now we are hiring 300 engineers now until Christmas to have our first launch beginning of next year. And we do everything in hyperspeed. And this is so interesting. He was the winner for the Olympics in mathematics and physics, and like a super bright guy. And every Friday I have a call with him for half an hour, and he always tries to explain me how physics is working. It's so easy, you know, like how when you go up, and I always ask him how fast is our. Conny, I explained you already 5 times how it works. So this is my most exciting one, I would say at the moment, because it's the most crazy one. We're just raising 100 million, and it's super easy. Also something interesting, the bigger ticket you raise, the easier it gets. The tough one is the million. Like we have those family, fools and friends. That's the initial starting point. And here it's of course also difficult because very little venture capital here. And families are not ready yet. So to get the funding, if you are already one of the very big ones, I think you get funding again. Then the Sequoias of the world and everybody comes, you know, or the Indian venture capitalists will come. But the problem is the Series A, you know, to do it well, and I think that is an issue. And my most successful one were my own companies, of course, but Liferando, and I can tell you my biggest fuck up was Kavak. Actually, it was one of my most successful ones, but I screwed it up big time. So I sold the company last year. It's a model like Auto One, a new way of selling cars. So we copied this idea to Mexico, and we entered at, let's say, 3 million valuation, and the company grew, and we were happy. SoftBank bought the company for 350 million. And we were like, yes, yes, yes. 1 year later, the valuation is officially at 8.8 billion. So that's what I call a mistake. And that is, my learning is you should never sell. If a company is successful, you don't have to repeat all the mistakes we did. Just never sell. Because if you're online and the model is working, just keep going. The valuations will go up. And the discussions I usually have with founders, and actually we are in the middle of selling 4 or 5 companies, is typically, listen, they offer 50 million to us. And I'm getting 12 million, and like a normal founder. And then he says, and I think we will sell. I never saw money in my life, and 12 million is more than I can spend. And I was like, guys, just wait just another year. It will be triple or 4 times. No, and then, but my trick is always ask your wife or your girlfriend. And then, and that's really the truth. I don't know how this happened. So they go home, and they ask their wives or girlfriends, and said, okay, what did she say? Should you sell for 50 now, or potentially for 200 next year? She thinks I should stay. So I think it makes a lot of sense to stay. So those were, successful, but not successful, because nothing is worse than those if you sell too early and then you see this development. The other one with the largest pizza delivery company in Europe, we sold far too early. Let's say we sold for 15, and our share would be now 400 million. So those are mistakes you should not repeat too often. But overall, if it's fun, if we enjoy ourselves, we can all drink and have fun, and it's all good. I mean, people always think when you have money or so, world changes so much. No, actually it doesn't. I mean, it's you still do the same things, and I'm still excited to invest in small companies or start companies. I'm still triggered to see a company which is starting and to make it bigger. And this is an interesting journey, and this is always different. And so for most of you, the best is still in front of you when you get into this flow that you start successfully a company. I know it's painful because you sweat and you work 7 days a week, but the reward afterwards is so high that then you want to do it again, hopefully.
So I've personally invested in over 25 companies, and I thought I was crazy until I saw your profile, over 200 plus companies. 400 plus companies. How do you manage across so many kind of investments, and maybe for other investors out here, what would you advise as things to look at and make, governance structures, etc. Maybe kind of giving them some guidance kind of early.
Well, you always need people like Love, who manage something, and and are on the ground, because just alone it does not work. If you don't support your companies, it will never work. So you have to be very hands-on, and I cannot be hands-on with so many companies. But what I do, I travel like this. I mean, before Corona at least, and now again. So to travel like this and visit those companies and sit together. And when you have so much experience, then you know exactly who to contact, what to do, how to change the company. Because the problems are always the same. And when you have done it, it's like flying an airplane. If you're sitting in the airplane the first time, it's kind of difficult. But if you have done it so many times, then you know exactly what button you have to push. And that's the same with building companies. And that is the reason why serial entrepreneurs are so much more successful than first-time entrepreneurs, because they know exactly what they have to do.
Okay. I want to open up to some questions from the crowd as well. If anyone wants to ask, we have questions that we can take. Dr. Cornelius, anyone? Somebody?
If not, I can also give a speech.
Sorry, one question. So, how do you normally see the timing of the exits? I know you have made mistakes, but now, given so much experience you've had, what is it you look out for which says that now this is the time to exit for me?
Yeah, that's something when I wake up at the middle of the night, this is what I'm thinking of. My learnings at the moment, don't sell. I mean, however you do it at the moment, it's wrong. Because in online it's different than from the classical world. In the classical world, there is a moment where you should sell. But if you are online and your e-commerce model is working, I'll give you an example. I have in India a company called Clovia. And Clovia is the largest woman underwear lingerie business in Southeast Asia. We have a few hundred employees, super successful, growing. And now we are selling. I'm against it, but what can I do? The founders, they want to sell. So I have to, I'm never against the founder. So because when you're an investor, one day you have to make a decision. Are you on the founder side or are you on the investor side? And I made a decision a long time ago, I'm always on the founder side. And so I sell, but it's the wrong moment. Next year it will be 300 billion, the valuation or whatever, any valuation. So there is no right or wrong. It depends what can you do with the money. So I'm always short on cash because I'm like a kid in a toy store. I'm so excited about it. I could spend, money, like on new ideas. And the problem is if you have the means, if you have the money, then you do it. So I get invited to amazing deals. I'm giving an example. We are an investor in the largest online play for insurances in Europe. It was a $2 billion euro company, and I was an early investor. And now it's 6 billion. But when we did a round at 2 billion, I knew that the next round will be at 6 billion. But when you know this, then you try to get all your money together and put the money on 2. Because 4 months later, it will be 6. And that is cool. So that is the reason why I'm always short on cash, because I'm so excited to invest in things, And that is the reason why I have investment funds and other people who would make the decisions, because I would spend all the money. So the funds are managed professionally, and we just raised another fund in Mexico, 180 million. And that's what we want. We want to do the same here, to start with a small fund here, to show it's possible, and then perhaps if we are successful, what I believe, then we start a second one. But it's of course not an easy journey here. It's not, we will not see the super exits very quick. But, I'm used to suffer, that it takes longer. And most of the investors, they want to have short-term returns. If it takes 5 years, it takes 5 years. So what?
Yeah. I saw one more question. Yeah.
You've noticed that seed rounds and friends and family rounds in Sri Lanka are quite limited. Liquidity seems to be quite limited. There's often not many people who are prepared to take a punt and support, startups. Do you think what do you think the remedy is for that? Do you think that legislation needs to change and the government's policies need to change to be more encouraging of investments like that? Or do you think that it's a matter of changing perception and investor perception? Which one comes first?
All of it. I mean, there's a wrong, you cannot always blame governments, because the problem is none of you guys want to work in government. And so if none of us wants to take responsibility for government, we should not just always look bad at them, because I think they try hard. And so I think government has to change, to be more open-minded. But what I hear is that there are special investment zones, that, a lot of good things I hear. Perhaps matching platforms, when you invest 1 million, that you get 1 million, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they are very much aware of it. I think it's more not on the subsidy side, but to open, like, regulator. If you want to start a bank, that you can get a license for banking, fintech license, let's say within 1 year and not 3 years. The problem politicians are facing around the world is that the establishment, so the owners of the banks and the owners of the insurance, the owners of the retail stores, they have no interest that the digital revolution is coming, because they make good money with the old world and they don't know the new world. So at the cocktail parties, you are not invited. The guys who are invited are the owners of the big companies. And they will tell their friends by playing golf, listen, we should be very careful for our country with the banking license. I think we are not ready yet. And what happens? Nobody gets a license. And the same with insurance, by the way. There's no reason why an insurance should be sold the old way. Insurance should be online, and and very easy to buy, and not a mystery. I think there's a lot which has to change. It's the mentality of society, the media. We always talk about when there's a scandal, but we should also, when there's somebody who's doing something great, we should put him as a lighthouse and say, hey, look, if you're successful, you can do this. Like in Arabia, there was one startup which became super successful, Careem, like the Uber of Arabia. And I know those guys, and now every young person wants to be like, become an entrepreneur. And this is what is missing here. We need more reference projects, that people can look up to in any part of Sri Lanka and say, hey, I want to become a person like this, because talent is everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Connie, let me ask you, is there areas in tech that you think are future-proof? You mentioned insurance is going to happen on the phone. That's one of the, we run a fintech accelerator. Are there areas in AI or blockchain or something that you think is really future-proof that is part of your investment thesis?
Well, I'm very opportunistic. I cannot tell you this in this sector. I'm always astonished when people say, oh, this is a blockchain. Here, you should really go big time. Yes, but it's also a lot of risk. So I don't know about, I have blockchain companies, but honestly, I don't know. I don't know if this is, it is the future, but the question is when. Because if you are too early, then you die until the market is coming. And this is a little bit the problem about blockchain at the moment, because everybody talks about it, but I don't see it at the moment. Yes, I know it will help us, but it's not there yet. There are other AI. I have not seen too many AI companies, because when you look behind the facade, it's not really AI. But I believe AI is one of the biggest markets in the future, and probably with the biggest changes. But so far, it's not there yet. But I like very much, I like video, for example, because younger generations, like my kids, they only want to see video. Like if you come with a steady website, they think, oh, that's really old-fashioned. My son is always like, Dad, it's not moving. I was like, yeah, but it's a normal website. Well, that's old-fashioned. So, newspapers are not anymore. My kids never touched a newspaper. Normal television, the young ones are not watching. But let's take the media companies in Sri Lanka. They still believe the life will go on with normal television. No, it will not. It will be Netflix and YouTube and many other streaming companies. You asked me for my most successful. It was last year, actually. There was a company which I didn't understand what they did, and I invested into it. It was a streaming company called Fubo. They did sports streaming. I said, what the heck is that? 500 sports channels? Who needs this? And then I met the people around there, and I said, well, I know them. No, also not very impressive. But I invested a little bit, because again, I did not want to miss something. And I invested at a valuation, let's say, of 20 million. And now it's a 5 billion company, 1 year later. And now the only thing I regret, why didn't you put in more money? So that is the issue. So you don't know, even if you're an expert on technology, but we don't know how consumer behavior is in the future. And if you always come up with your normal, traditional mindset, like what society has, you will be wrong. So the reason why is Elon Musk so successful? Because he shows us that everything is possible. He thinks out of the box. And normal managers, they don't think out of the box. They think, how do I get my contract again? But if you always try to be conservative and careful, then you will not come up with amazing ideas.
Okay. Any other questions from the crowd? Yeah, Udo?
Mm-hmm. Over there? Okay.
Oh, there's one here too.
Thank you very much. Very inspirational, I must say. My question relates a little bit to the context here in Sri Lanka. I think it's important because you are here, obviously, with an objective. And I wanted to come back to one of the comments that you made related to the families here and the financing. Who could finance those? We know that there is a gap here in terms of financing some of the startups. what is the strategy to bring those families back into the game first? And how do you share, because you mentioned that you were sharing actually the risk across your own portfolio, but I guess you also, when you invest, you want to share the risk with other investors, right? So here probably in this type of frontier markets like Sri Lanka, you might want to have also a little bit of a skin in the game from the big companies, the big businessmen that are here, that can also move at the same time a little bit the regulatory and policy framework here that will encourage actually the business to thrive. So it's a complex business partnership that involves funding, but also the influence that those businessmen here that would put also co-finance with you bring. So what would be your strategy here, and how you share this risk?
So,
and
first of all, this shift will come automatically, because now the next generation is taking over. The next generation is much more open-minded, and otherwise you have to talk to ask them for their responsibility. If you are a very rich person and you are 70, then you should not. Then you should care for the next generation and say, hey, I want that my country gets better, and not to think about, hey, can I make more money and put my money somewhere? It's about giving back. And that is why I'm very harsh with most of the super rich, because they only are interested in investing in real estate to make more money. But real estate I'm not saying it's bad, it's just, it does not help a country. It's good that you have some nice buildings, but at the end, it is all about entrepreneurship, which makes a country progress. And why? So what my offer is that we invest together. We win together, we lose together. And without the local investors, we cannot do it, because any country, it works the way it works. Let's say, I don't know, but there are 20 families who run the country, by the way, in any country. Those 20 families, and you need one or two of those families, part of it, who trust you and say, okay, let's do this together. We invest a little bit, and then we will see. And that is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit careful that now people just start venture capital firms. People who are not experienced to start a venture capital firm is something very dangerous. Why? They're starting a venture capital firm without knowing in what they invest, and then they will lose money. It's guaranteed that they will lose money. And then the investors, like the families, will say, see, I tried it. It's not working. So therefore, we have a responsibility, we as investors also, and startup entrepreneurs, that we should not promise the sky. We should be honest with the investors and tell them, listen, don't call me next year and ask me for what your return is. You have to know it will take 5 to 7 years, and in this time, give me the time to develop and coach me. But don't ask for returns, because this is a long game. And then most of the families, they ask you, yeah, but how about cash flow? When is profitability? I cannot help those people. If they ask those stupid questions, then it's really, I'm so sorry, but then it shows that they haven't been around for the last 10, 15 years. That they only lived in their small, old world of retail or whatever they did, because the world has changed. Amazon did not make money for a long time. Most of our companies are not making money. They are reinvesting everything. It's all about market share. The reward comes at the end when you kick out the established players. And this is what's now happening. Look at the retail, it's now online. Look at the banks in other parts, it's now online. And the same with any industry. So it's, you have to be patient, and people are not patient enough because they're focused too much on quick money.
Let me ask a question about scale. And one of the problems that we have in Sri Lanka is a limited size, right? We're based in Sri Lanka, and what we try and do is get startups to think about going outside of Sri Lanka as soon as possible, right? To neighboring markets like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc. Can I ask you, when Lion Ventures comes in, you think that's something that they can bring in terms of what they can do in terms of scale and helping startups kind of go to market globally, and maybe a bit more about Lion Ventures?
Yeah, it's good to be ambitious, but it would be already help if you're the market leader in your country and consolidate the market, because 22 million inhabitants is big enough. to make a living.
Yeah.
So don't go too early abroad because it's a complex business if you don't know India or Pakistan or so. It's not an easy one. So I would do the first step first to become a market leader here and then perhaps merge with somebody. Because this just, I conquer many markets, it's very difficult. I mean, actually, to be honest, I haven't seen it actually that somebody's capable. So for us, Germans, to go to France, it's more difficult than for us to go to Sri Lanka. Because France is just around the corner, but it's just a different mentality, and they're amazing entrepreneurs, but somehow it is not easy. So when we see European companies, then they usually merge. But to roll out, because it's a complex process to roll out internationally.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to invite two more other speakers to the stage. Prajeet, who you all know from BOV Capital, who has many successful investments locally. Please. And I think this next session is going to be more about the ecosystem in Sri Lanka. So Prajeet. And also I'd like to invite Nathan, my co-founder at Hatch. So I think we have some very powerful players on the stage. And I'd like to start maybe with Prajeet, who has made investments in Sri Lanka and has had successes. Would you like to maybe share a bit about why you chose Sri Lanka? Obviously you're Sri Lankan, but and why what made the successful startups and your selection process and thinking about it?
So Jeevan is working. Can you hear? Yeah. So I'm still waiting for the successor. So had one last year, but not as much as what Connie was talking about. But for the same reasons as what Connie said, right? It's about being in a nascent market and coming in to create something, and the early bird catches the worm kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons when we came, actually in 2009 when we created BOV Capital. At that time, the market did not exist at all. There was no ecosystem. There was no venture capital. There was no angel investments. Actually, when we launched the Lankan Angel Network, we had a massive party and invited all the friends, and they asked me, where are the angels? I said, show me the check, show me the money. Right? It became a bit of a joke, but eventually it grew, and then we had competitions like Venture Engine that brought in, and you were, Connie, earlier you were talking about how you have this competition where you have 150 companies apply, the 10 finalists come into the finals, and then you invest in those 10 finalists, hoping to have 1 or 2 free successes, right? And this is something we've been doing from 2012. And actually, in that respect, we had one exit last year. We are looking at listing a company this year, a company in retail, e-commerce. And I'm listening to you. We are not exiting. We're just listing it and making sure we bring in more. So a company called Zigzag, which we are looking to move forward. Then we've invested in other companies in Sri Lanka, which have also grown quite well. And so we've done, through the Angel Network, we've done about 25 companies. Through the venture capital stage, we've done about 12 companies. We've done about 2 billion rupees. That's about $10 million now today of investments, $10-12 million of investment just through our network. And I think now we will see over the last 10 years, it's a long journey. Nothing is short, right? It's not a T20 match, right? So we've seen this journey, and we've been ready for that for a while, right? So for us, I think now we will start slowly seeing the traction happening. We've also seen a lot of the investors in Sri Lanka having a mindset change. When we launched the Angel Fund, we had 100 angels who came in and put in $1 million, which is a great start, right? I mean, next fund will be probably 5 million rupees, and it'll go on so on so forth. It's also not, as you rightly said, it's not also about the exits. It's about the value created. And today I've seen a few companies that have a lot of value. And if I want to exit, maybe I might look at options, and the entrepreneur might provide that for me. On the other side of the coin, the entrepreneur might want to continue with that journey as well. So in a long way, I think
Okay.
Success has seen more failures actually. So, and Jeevan, you've been there in the same journey as me since 2012. So you've seen that as well, right?
So I'll just build up on that. As a early investor, when I first started investing, it was more to learn and understand the ecosystem, and now I guess it's kind of changing into, yes, we would like to see invest in startups that have traction. Some of the frustrations you might have as an investor here are things like tax and etc. Do you want to maybe explain some of the things that we have been lobbying with government to kind of change the ecosystem and kind of prop it up, I guess?
Well, I mean, that's, I suppose, an ongoing thing. I mean, it hasn't distracted us in terms of the investments we've made. So the structures need to be refined more and more. And I'm told that it's happening as we speak, it's happening. So hopefully with this, in November with the new budgets, the LLP structures might come in and things like that. So that will actually help more investments to come into Sri Lanka, right? So that helps with the taxation system, right? So in the past, where if it's a private company, you may get taxed twice on the same investments, which we have, but that didn't actually deter us. We kept going, right? I mean, you still made money.
Yeah.
So as long as you make money, it's okay.
Yeah.
Pay a little bit more taxes than less, but that's fine too, right? So, I mean, we set up in Singapore.
I think the LLP structure hopefully will come up.
That will
with
definitely
budget.
help. That will definitely help for more companies to set up the I suppose, venture funding structure, right? So whether it's in angel funding or whether it's in venture investments. And what the country is lacking today is the growth stage funding. So as I've said, Series A and above, you don't see that. And then you have the private equity. So there's a big gap there, and that's what needs to be filled up. Because all this work we are doing now, with angel investments, seed capital coming, a lot of family companies coming, a lot of individuals, high net worth investors coming and putting in money, right? So you've seen that happening. Where do these companies go and exit is probably the next stage, right? And that's going to be the bigger venture capitals who will come in, or maybe go to market. And even for them to go to market, they'll need, I mean, Sri Lanka, as you said, is small, right? So you can only scale so much. And certain companies like Zigzag have scaled within Sri Lanka, and they've done quite well. But maybe certain B2B companies, right? So those SaaS companies, they'll need to probably go outside Sri Lanka, because again, what's happened in the past is, Nsinga is a classic case, right? I'll give you Nsinga. Nsinga it was an IoT for the Apple sector. They tried hard to create a market here. They couldn't. We came in as investors. We took them out. 2-3 years later, they were in 7 countries. And they had a lot of traction, and we exited them last year. Right? And they were bought out by a company called Zilingo in Singapore, who came in as a customer and then wanted to acquire them. Right? So I mean, we would have stayed on, but then Zilingo wanted to buy the whole company, and we told the entrepreneur, you can continue with them. So we exited from that perspective. So that's one example, right? To create that kind of an exit, we need to be outside Sri Lanka, and also to scale. Also, it helps to be outside Sri Lanka, because the market is still nascent. As a result of that, startups struggle to grow fast here. Customers are still very, I suppose, not too sure in terms of, because these are all, whether they'll exist tomorrow is another question, right? Yeah. So, and then you give the business.
Yeah. Dr. Connie, your fund, Lion Ventures, have you picked a stage or where you're most comfortable when you enter a market? Is it at seed stage? Is it Series A, Series B, VC, or do you kind of look across all of it? Maybe you can.
No, it's, as I said, opportunistic. It depends what you find in the market. You cannot say. I mean, the good thing is we can do anything. Okay. We can, but you do very early stage investment for the return, and late stage for security. And that depends what your flavor is. And what is very dangerous just to invest very early. Just seed or pre-seed is very dangerous, because you go home and you always say you are successful, but it takes 7-8 years until you will bring any money home. So that is difficult. So what we learned, it's a mixture where you go in very early for the ecosystem is important, or very late. So to go in, like in your company, you just said, to go in there now and to hope that it will be a 3x. A 3x is good, A 30x is better, but it's with so much risk. So it depends what you want. So my recommendation is we will see the big families of Sri Lanka will enter when there are more companies which are a little bit later stage, because the families here, from what I understood, are not ready yet to take so much risk. Because it has also something to do, usually what happens, when I talk to families, there's a father and then there's a daughter or a son. And the father says, yeah, my son should learn this, I know this. And then he invests in something and then goes wrong. And then the father said, you know, that wasn't good, you know, look at your dad, how successful he was, you know. Oh, that's so annoying. So therefore, we have to be careful a little bit and to support the son that he says, okay, you know, start with late stage investments where you aim at 2x. That's good, you know, where there is 1 or 2 years for exit, because the father cannot wait more than 2 years for an exit, because otherwise he will tell you, my son has tried it, it's not working, because he did not learn it. His old mindset and how companies have to be is they have to be cash flow positive after a certain period of time. And so therefore my recommendation is to, you know, to go later stage in this case. But otherwise, if there is a good Series A, why not, you know? Yeah. I mean, but I don't know the market well enough, and perhaps it's a little bit early, but, you know, we are here to have time.
Yeah.
And it's good.
Thank you. Let me bring in my co-founder who's just been recently wakeboarding. And
he tried wakeboarding.
Just to, you know, change the pace, I think you've been really focused on, you know, purpose-driven kind of funding, right, around women in entrepreneurship, etc. Do you just want to give a bit of flavor of that, and I guess talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah. So this was damaged from a meeting with the startup this morning. So, but more interestingly, what we've been looking at Hatch and all of the things that's happened over the last 3 years. And what we found is that there are a lot of interesting investors coming in and looking at certain sectors. And you're right about the big families. They don't want to take risk. They're happy to either take 51% of a company or try and put them out of business. So those are the two things that have been happening. But there are people who really want to support the ecosystem and drive it. And one of the things that we've seen is a massive gap in looking at gender-based investments. Specifically, the female founders have really found it difficult in even getting meetings with the right people, or even getting a product out there and trying to scale it. So Jeevan and I and Brinda, right from the beginning, started looking at how we can support a gender-based ecosystem as well. Not saying that the guys don't get the support, but we just decided that they need some additional support overall. So we started some programs at Hatch just to bring the accelerators, incubators, and some also some of the programs overseas. We brought them in to support business building. And we felt that by putting in $1 into a gender-based fund, that we should be able to prop up the economy. If you look at Sri Lanka's economy, as everybody knows, the top 3 wage earners are still female, whether you look at the apparel industry, the tea industry, or the migrant workers, they're all female. And then when you look at investments globally, and especially in Southeast Asia, you see that a lot of the most successful companies that are coming out now are led by female, or are really solving a female-related market. So we feel that we should be looking at more impact funding, maybe looking at returns in a different way, but it's not to say that we're looking at it in a charitable way. We're looking at returns, but in terms of just supporting them through the ecosystem, through the growth, and through the global network that we have built as well. Fortunately, me being a Kaufman Fellow, Jeevan being on several boards overseas, we were able to bring that network from overseas as well. And I think COVID has been a good thing for Sri Lanka, because from an ecosystem point of view, we've been able to connect with global organizations that previously refused to do or come into Sri Lanka because they were so busy doing other things. But we found an hour or 2 hours we had some great speakers, we've had some great partnerships that we've signed, and we've been able to grow during that period. So I think COVID has been a great thing for the startups in Sri Lanka, because they've seen and got airtime with investors, with partners, and also with global alliances like GIZ and others who've come through. So I think it's a great time in Sri Lanka to be investing in very focused, impact-driven funds.
You've been, I guess, a day here, so it's not too much time to really absorb everything. But I guess Sri Lanka.
This was my first time.
Okay, but Sri Lanka is blessed with a great geographical location. I think a reasonable, where middle-income country. All the kind of indicators that should be there for growth are kind of there. What do you think Sri Lanka needs, Connie, to really take us to the next level, right? To really boost, if tomorrow we want to say, as you said, we want 2 unicorns out from Sri Lanka, what do you really think should catalyze that growth? And how do you think we should go about it? Now, there's a lot of high-power people in this room. If we all put our minds to it, or if you were to give us a vision and say, can we all get together and do something? What do you think we need to do in the next?
Well, first of all, meetings like this is important because it's always, that you exchange ideas, that you work together, that you get to know each other, and that is one. Second, I believe it comes automatically. You will be successful over a longer period of time. I'm sure about it because of demographics, because of let's say South Asia, Southeast Asia will be a growth sector anyhow. Forget Europe. We have 0 or 1% growth rate, old people. So I think the place to be in the future is here. So it will come automatically. But having said this, I think well, of course you have to be lucky also with who's running the country. Does he have a vision for the country? Do you have in mind, like, you have to ask him, how will this society make money in 10, 20 years from now? Will it be still the old way, let's say, with tourism, agriculture, whatever, or will be more modern? Because you have the skill set, you have the talents here, you have, and they are perhaps not occupied so much of it, and the world is desperate for talents. So this kind of talents, I think that would be very, very interesting. And if you educate them well, I think it will be automatic. And otherwise, we have to start the regulator. We have to tell them, hey, be more open-minded. We need more VC, and then we need exit channels, because at the end of the day, you cannot start companies if there's nobody who wants to buy them one day. And but therefore, the traditional families or companies, they have to be open-minded also to acquire somebody. If this works, if it works. So there are many ways of doing it, but there's not one single recipe. I think it's more complicated than this. Sometimes people, politicians, they say, well, with this one thing, one thing what is done, like in France or in other countries, you give tax benefits. For example, you invest in the company and you can deduct the money you invested in this startup, you can deduct from your income tax. That's also one way, but it's a little bit inflationary. It's not solid because you force the people into venture capital who don't want to invest in venture capital. So that is also not smart. But there are different ways of getting there. But I think as a society, everybody has to work with each other. It is other universities, with the companies, with the startups. It would help if every CEO of a big company would sit together regularly with some startups. Okay. It would change his mindset, and vice versa, because for the startup entrepreneurs, it would also help to get to know the big guys. And if this is happening, and I have seen it in many countries, then it will work. So be optimistic about it.
There you go, guys. I want to open up for a few more questions around ecosystem in particular. Anyone interested to take any questions?
One point I want to make, just to elaborate on Connie's last statement, the apparel sector actually changed the way things were done in Sri Lanka. So we have done it in the past, so it's not that we can't do it again. It's just that I think each industry needs to put its mind to it and get it done, right? And this was done in the 90s, right? So.
Connie, I have a question for you. What's your mindset in terms of, I think when you talk about families and wanting to get into this early stage investments and looking at returns of 3-4 years versus a quick return on a private equity investment, what's your mindset in terms of the permanent capital, and has that changed over time in terms of your investment thesis?
What do you mean by permanent capital?
Companies that you want to own for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I own companies for 10 years, but it's not because I want it, because I have to. That's a big difference. So I'm more like, I'm not really, sometimes I don't feel like an investor, I feel like more a collector of companies. So something you'd never sell, but it's just because, also in Europe, it's very difficult. Even successful startups don't find somebody who wants to buy them. So what we see at the moment in Europe, it's very frustrating. It's Americans and Chinese. So they buy it. But the Europeans, I mean, we have money ourselves, but we are so traditional still that it's not happening. And I don't know if it always helps us. So I sold now my last company, one of the companies, to Facebook. That's still okay, but if we sell everything, let's say, to China, I know that we have a port project now financed by China. It is easy money, but I can just tell you from experience, it's very dangerous money. Because you don't know what they ask you later, what you have to do, and they can put a lot of pressure on you. So look around what money Europe offers, because there's a lot of GIZ. You told, I work with them very closely, but there's a lot of money also in Europe and Germany for Sri Lanka. I'm very positive about it. You just have to find a way to get it. But there is enough money in the world. People just don't try hard enough to find it. And perhaps there we can help together. That we say, hey, listen, have you ever thought about EBRD or EIB or many other, or next time you go to Berlin, visit the Ministry for Foreign Aid. People don't know, but Germany is the largest subsidizer for Africa, bigger than the US, bigger than, or as big as China. I mean, but we are not good at marketing. We do a lot of things, but it is not known. And I think that is, so we have to find new, if you don't find the money here locally to support you, then we have to perhaps look around. But I'm very optimistic that the people here is enough money in the country to do this. We don't need much money. If 1% of the investment which goes into real estate, I saw all those new investments here. If 1% would go into startups, we would be all fine, and the whole ecosystem would boom.
Absolutely. Any questions from the crowd?
Yeah.
That's-
Are you only investing in tech businesses? How about any traditional sectors?
I told you I'm opportunistic. I invest in anything. I mean, as long as it's legal, So that is. But I tell you, I just did an investment where people ask me, is that a tech investment? We're just building in Southeast Asia, South Asia. We were building a coffee chain called Flash Coffee, and this is the fastest. And we call it the Starbucks killer. I mean, you always need a name for it, And what I like about it is so much that the most successful investors of Europe started this. Rocket Internet, Delivery Hero, and some others. And what we do is we sell Starbucks 60% cheap. We sell coffee 60% cheaper than Starbucks, because in many areas of the world, people run around with their cups of Starbucks because it's hey, I can afford Starbucks. But it is not good, because I think it would be fair that people can really afford it, a coffee. So therefore, we cut the cost by 60%, but we still make a fortune. And we are growing, and the unit economics are so cool, because we are 1/3 of the space, and we do 60% delivery, and it's completely tech-enabled, and we are growing like hell. And it's not tech, but it's something which is growing very fast. And it does not always have to be tech, and deep tech also. As I said, it is dangerous, it takes very long. So come up with an easy business model.
Okay.
Thank you.
Behind you?
Connie, especially in emerging markets, have you had issues with government policy and consistency of policy? I think this is one of the issues we sometimes experience in Sri Lanka, not so much for tech, but more industries, where there is a lack of consistency in policy. Has that affected you, and would you like to comment on that?
I'm for 32 years an entrepreneur, so I have had also my bad experience with this. One other good news I have for tonight is we are in a world now with internet and tech investments where there is very little bribing, which is very good because bribing is the worst thing for a country. In the old world, if you wanted to get any contract, probably not in Sri Lanka, but in the rest of the world, you had to, you have to give money. And for me, it was the same, wherever it was. I mean, actually, it was legal until the year 2000 in Europe. If you just have to declare it by tax. It's funny, huh? And, but this is not allowed anymore, so you should not do it. And in our world, we don't need this. So I don't see it so much that it's more on the side that you don't get a license. But it's not that somebody tells you, well, this is not working, or you don't get the approval, or whatever. I have not seen it. So with internet, because nobody can ask you for something, because you can always move it away. And I think that is very promising. I'm not against government, but if too much government is involved, it will take very long, and it gets very difficult. That is the reason why some sectors I'm not in favor. Give you an example. E-health. It's an amazing sector. It's the future. But if you're always dependent on a regulator that he allows you to do certain businesses, then it makes it very difficult. So in countries like Europe, it's heavily regulated what you do in health. And that makes it difficult. So yes and no. But we should not beat up on governments only. I mean, you can imagine when I give speeches that sometimes they come to me and they complain. Because I also have to live with them, so usually when I travel around, I always meet a minister and talk with him about and there are many good people now. I mean, we have new ministers, new style, who are not interested that they become rich, who really care for a country. And here you can see people here care for their country. They are proud of their country. I mean, why did you come back? Because you want to change something. You want to move your country to a positive side. And I think that's normal, and this is what you see everywhere in the world. So we should not just always blame the politicians. I think a lot of good people are there who also want to make a change to a better.
Okay. All right, I think we're running out of time, so I'll go one last round of a wish list, maybe starting with Prajeet, for an ecosystem to be built. If there's one ask, and you wish you had it today for Sri Lanka to go to the next stage, what would that be? And I'll go myself as well.
I mean, I think given the number of technology graduates in the country, I don't think we can build a massive services company, right? I don't think we have that. We can't do that, right? I mean, even the ones that have done it here have gone outside and looked at talent, right? So I think for Sri Lanka, we should look at what is unique to Sri Lanka in terms of scalability, and also the number of graduates that are coming out. So if you look at the highly skilled tech graduates that are coming out, it's the productized companies that are going to make a difference, like the stock exchange software that we built for the world, right? So we have that caliber of entrepreneurs that are coming out. Now, in order to scale them, it's like building a mansion, right? So to build a mansion, you need money. That is where the venture capital money comes, angel investment money comes in. Because, and as you rightly said, Connie, you can't go and ask those companies for a return for the first 5 years because they are still building that house, right? Yield will happen later because you will rent it and it will become bigger and better. Of course, there's a risk element because the structure is not done correctly, then they can fail. So there is a risk element there, but I think that's where, as we all do, we don't put all eggs in one basket. We put in about 10, 12 different companies, but we tend to focus on productized companies because we feel those are the companies that will take it forward for Sri Lanka. Right? If I was in India, it's a different story. I might look at services company, but here, I think because of scale. So to answer your question, Jeevan, then for these companies to grow, we need at least 1% of our GDP money to come towards the investments, to the growth stage investments, venture funding investments. That's my wish.
My wish is just more risk-taking culture, that we are, as a society, as government, knowing we have to take more risk in order to manage the future. If we are not willing to try things, to also fail once in a while, if you just stay at home and you don't want to risk anything, you will not make it. So we have to go out there, try things, and change a little bit of mentality that we see. The older generations always say, I'm worried about the next generation. Since Aristotle, by the way, all the generations are saying the next generation, it doesn't look good. It's bullshit. The next generation is always better than the previous one. So we shouldn't be too worried about, but we should give them also the opportunity.
My wish, I guess, as an ecosystem builder would be really, I believe in Sri Lanka, we're in a really unique position in the South Asian region. And I really think we have an opportunity to market Sri Lanka as a startup nation, because in very many ways, Sri Lanka is a startup nation. And I believe, I think if we really position ourselves, and Connie said it's about marketing, it's about getting your word out there. I really wish we had the opportunity to really market Sri Lanka as a startup nation where people can come into Sri Lanka and go to the rest of the South Asian region. You make that journey very easy. I believe that's possible, and I think we need a few structural things. Prajeet talked about 1% of GDP into the startup ecosystem. I'll even go fine-tune that, and I think we can look at the angel side because we look at much early stage investing. We need to allow just Sri Lankans to invest into startups with tax benefits, right? This globally, we've gone to ecosystems across the world, and usually there's a tax write-off. If I'm able to put in 1 million, 5 million rupees into an investment, I don't have to pay taxes. That would be a very, very secure policy. Another strong one would be just starting a fund and matching funds that come in, like Prajeet's fund, like Northern's fund. If the government could really match that fund one-to-one, because the funds that set up here in Sri Lanka are taking the initial risk. Maybe for the first 5 or 10 funds that set up, I really believe that the government should match it, and that matching will really pay exponentially in terms of bringing in investment, revenue, etc. So my wish is that the government will take the suggestion seriously.
I think the opportunity here is to take a lot more risk, and for families to get together and pool their cash and take the risk together if they don't want to do it together, do it by themselves. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of the family offices here to work together and really pool an opportunity for these startups, because I think that's one way of you giving them access to capital, but also access to knowledge, access to an ecosystem that's outside of their peril today. So I think that will be my thing, that give some more time for the families to get together and pool their capital together.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I believe it's networking now, so there's drinks and a vade cart and ice cream. So please feel free to mingle and meet Connie as well. Thank you.